moving towards becoming a social enterprise. We'll give you a little bit of the philosophy in this, followed by the need today to move into this, some of the processes we will talk about, the tools and the benefits. In terms of the philosophy, let's tell you briefly the philosophy of the internet and what it managed to bring in and what it managed to change. The number one stipulation there are markets are conversations. So it's no longer a one-way traffic, it's no longer a broadcast or an announcement like an advertisement or just a message passed down. These are markets are conversations. Secondly, the internet enables conversations among humans that weren't quite possible in the area of mass media. So therefore, we have enabling technology here which makes conversations of various kinds possible. Number three, in both the inter-networked markets and among intra-networked employees, people are therefore beginning to speak to each other in different ways. So they're beginning to speak to each other on a peer-to-peer basis, on a much more equal footing than was possible in the era of the mass media. Number four, public relations often did not relate to the public companies, and so therefore companies have been afraid of their markets. Now, for example, there was more information that was withheld or suppressed than was shared, and so therefore, even though it was called public relations, it was a very tailored, constricted, overhyped, and sometimes not very truthful exercise. Now that's beginning to change. Number five, today's organizational chart therefore is a hyperlink chart, and it's not a hierarchical chart, it's not the classical pyramid that you've seen. So respect for hands-on knowledge always wins over respect for abstract authority. So no longer is it possible to flaunt a label or just a designation and say, hey, I'm the boss, so therefore you must follow me come what may. That doesn't work too often anymore. Number six, this is a message from your consumer or from the customer where he's saying, you want us to pay, level with us, tell us something honest and interesting for a change, and then we'll consider whether we want to pay or not. Some of the other trends and projections, the growing importance of social proof. Now, social proof is like an endorsement or a confirmation about a product or a service from a very credible source, a source who is independent and who is considered to have integrity. Now, this may be a friend or an associate or a colleague or a known public figure or a celebrity or whatever, but that is social proof. Okay. Now, it has to be an independent source because a social proof should not be somebody who is being paid to deliver a message. Number two, the increasing trend of what we call so, more, low, which is so standing for social, more for mobile, and low for local. So that is where the movement is happening. It's all beginning to move towards social, towards mobile, and towards local. To give you just a glimpse of how this is happening, the world population today is about 7.1 billion, and the number of mobile phone subscriptions stands at 6.8 billion. So there you are. Number three, the coming of the second web. Now, the second web is basically a whole web of objects, which means that these are objects like maybe a watch or a glass or some other object, or maybe a camera which can talk to each other and through the internet, and also talk to a whole web of people who are also on the internet. So you have this interconnection between a whole web of objects and a whole web of people, and that is really, it's the coming of the second web, or maybe the web 2.0 if you want to define it that way. Number four, live logging and augmented reality devices and semantic search. These three are increasingly beginning to be realities today. Live logging is basically photographing or video recording virtually every activity of an individual over a period of time. Now today, for example, there are cameras which can do this send out time-lapse photos of at an interval of 30 seconds, which are all stored in the cloud. And this can be done, you can keep on doing this till the energy source is available. So that's live logging. Then you have Google Glass, which should be available next year, which can pretty much do some of these things and a lot more. And semantic search is basically, it's a movement away from Boolean search. Search is a huge subject, but a semantic search is more like an English knowledge, like intuitive search, which more often than not, drawing on your personalization and drawing on vast amounts of data, can anticipate or certain queries or certain searches. Now, here is a very important point in terms of how the business transformation happens. And this is one of the most important and one of the most difficult points, because a lot of conventional organizations today are closed, selective, and controlling. So they are very hierarchical, pyramidal. It's a one-way traffic as far as messages and communication goes, and so on. Very regimented. Now, from there, the organization, a social business or a social enterprise, has to move towards being engaged, connected, and adaptive, and therefore move towards a far greater degree of transparency. So this is a huge shift that has to take place in an organization across all departments and across all levels for it to become a social business and for social implementation to be successful. Now let's look at some of the smaller aspects of the changes which happen on the way towards becoming a social business. So, for example, number one, on the left side you have the don'ts, and on the right side you have the do's. So you stop sending messages internally and externally. Instead, you start building relationships internally and externally. You discard systems, technologies, processes which have led to the building of silos within an organization. So this could be departmental silos, locational silos, and various other kinds of silos. So instead of silos, you build engagements and conversations all across. Number three, debunk misconceptions, myths, and fears about social media. Very prevalent, very widespread, and for good reasons, because a lot of people feel that social media is a non-productive, counterproductive kind of network. It's a waste of time. So you need to debunk those myths and fears. And thus, by doing so, it is very important for social business to happen and for social to succeed within an enterprise, to gain executive sponsorship. Because without executive sponsorship, little implementations here and there will never quite work. Number four, never try a make it up as we go along kind of approach, because this will lead to fallouts, a lot of errors and damaging fallouts, which can set back the entire process. Instead, you should use expert guidance in building social employees, social managers, and a social CEO, and build and manage external communities as well as internal communities. So what are the mix of a social business? So you have these three aspects, which are people, processes, and technology. Now within people, we've already mentioned some of these. You need to look at organizational models, you need to look at executive support, you need to look at dismantling silos, you need to look at collaboration across all levels, and you need marketing investment in social media. Within processes, you need to set up, we're going to be covering some of these later in this presentation. You need to look at governance policies, you need to look at social media guidelines, feedback, workflows, enterprise expansions, and management philosophy, which is, like we said, very important. Do you want to be a social business truly or not? In terms of technology, you have tools and apps for internal collaborations, then you have community softwares, listening platforms, sentiment analysis, apps, social CRMs, um, apps and tools which are for a whole variety of analytics and metrics and so on. And finally, um, big data strategy and implementation if you need it. If your data volumes and your data velocities and the amount of structured unstructured data that you have risen to those levels where you need to fall back on this is the tool which can be very, very useful in making meaning out of all that huge mass of data. Let's quickly look at a few snapshots about figures and in numbers, which will give you a good enough idea about where we are going with this. Now, these are some reasonably recent statistics from last year about the internet world. And as you can see, these are given in terms of continents and regions. Let's quickly browse through the Asia figures. Now, out of a population of about 4,000 million or 4 billion, you have internet users which are a little over a billion, which accounts for about 27.5% of the total population. So there's still a long way to go in terms of a spread of the internet. The growth over the last 12 years has averaged at about 840 odd percent, which is tremendous, and it's expected to grow at that rate, if not faster. Users as a percentage of the total. Now, this is the total global internet population. 45% of that is in Asia. This chart is a pictorial depiction of the same figures. As you can see, 45% of the total internet users are in Asia, followed by Europe with 21.5%, and then by North America and Latin America and so on. These are the top internet countries in Asia. As you can see, China has a huge advantage there over every other country. The number 2 is India, but China is at about 538 million compared to about 137 million for India, followed by Japan and Indonesia and South Korea and so on. Now, here are some quick highlights about the web and social media. Total number of index pages on the open web is about 14.4 billion. This is as of about late March 2013. These are the pages which are typically indexed by search engines like Google and Bing and so on. Twitter has about 400 million total accounts. LinkedIn has about 220 million. YouTube has 1 billion active users. Facebook has 1.1 billion active users monthly, and Google Plus has 390 million active users. An active user is defined as a user who transacts on that network at least once a month. So he does something or the other. Either he posts or he comments or he puts up a photo or does some other activity. Okay, what does all this achieve? Quickly. It supplements your existing efforts in marketing, in customer support, in HR, in communications, and business intelligence, and it does so tangibly and cost effectively. So it's not a disruptive model where you uproot existing efforts and initiatives. Existing efforts and initiatives remain very much in place. Now, it's as a force multiplier. This needs acceptance and adoption by the apex management and also by the departmental heads in order to succeed within an enterprise. There are a number of studies, including one by IBM and Forbes magazine, which shows that a social CEO is more effective than a conventional CEO, and his enterprise is therefore more competitive as well. Now, there's a mindset change which is needed, like we said, across the organization. So you transition from a closed, selective, controlling mindset to an open, random, and a supportive mindset. And the definitions and measures that are worked out to measure the effectiveness of social media have to be closely aligned with the organizational and departmental objectives. So with your goals, with your strategies, with your KPIs. We just talked about apprehensions and myths that management and apex management might have, and why it is so important to address those and debunk those myths and gain executive sponsorship. Now, these are a few of the common myths. Social media is a waste of time, it's a passing fad, it will lead to major changes and be quite a disruptive process, and we aren't ready for it. Now, it will give an outlet to people and customers to start saying all kinds of embarrassing and negative things publicly. Confidential organizational information could leak out through social media. And finally, the clincher, which says that it involves a fair bit of work, and we neither have the manpower nor the necessary expertise to do this. So, as you can see on the right, the first few points, the first few apprehensions, they need not be apprehensions because each of these factors is completely controllable. And also, this is like any other corporate communication or corporate, uh, you know, process. So therefore, there are going to be enough checks and balances in the whole thing, and it's not laissez-faire, free-for-all kind of situation. Now, talking about some applications, attributes, and overarching benefits of this. Like we mentioned earlier, social media business or a social media department can be applicable to marketing, business development, customer support, HR, corporate communication, PR, and so on. It facilitates brand and relationship buildings through conversations, which are both internal and external. It can work equally well in B2C, B2B, B2P, all kinds of environments. It supplements existing efforts of the organization or of the department in each of these areas, and it is therefore a cost-effective supplement which can be tangibly measured. Okay, it needs to be sustained over a period. There's no magic here, so it's not that you can flip a switch and start getting results from day two. That doesn't happen. Key parameters, once defined, the results can be seen and measured, and therefore the progress or the lack of it can be seen, and if need be, from plan A or plan B can be switched to, and so on. Now, also as we mentioned earlier, all this builds towards creating a social business which has been shown to be performing better comparatively, growing better, and showing better bottom lines compared to conventional businesses. Now, this is one of the approaches. It's a strategic approach. So you first need to define a mission of social media. A mission is typically a non-financial statement that addresses the what versus the how, and sets the directions and aids in decision making. So that's typically like an organizational mission statement. You need to define your social goals and objectives. Now, these have to be in measurable terms, targets, or define the outcomes for achieving a particular task. And this social goals and objectives have to be in sync with the mission earlier defined. And like many others, best of breed consultants, we adopt and we recommend the SMART approach. And the SMART approach stands for be specific, be measurable, be achievable, be relevant, be time specific as far as your goals and objectives are concerned. After that, you drill down to a social strategy and a tactical plan. And a strategy takes into consideration the organizational, departmental, and team goals and defines the how for the what that we defined earlier. Tactics are, of course, within strategies. These are specific documented actions which need to be taken to achieve the strategic goals, and these have to be aligned with mission and strategy. Now, some of these include things like a social media governance policy, which is very important, which is often the starting point for social media, a social media guidebook, then training to employees to enable effective use of the internal apps or the external apps or both, which are being used for social media. Definition of measures and metrics together with the departmental heads and the Apex management and the measurement tools therefore can be defined as the ones that need to be used given the what ifs, as long as they're defined. And you need to implement within these, you need to implement aspects like social listening, like sentiment analysis. We shall not talk in detail about those because each of those has its own suite of apps and tools that help you to do this. This is a quick summary of the external networks that most of you would have heard of about or familiar with. Now, these are like Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, YouTube, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Reddit. There are several others. StumbleUpon, Quora, Script. Then, of course, you have the corporate blogs and the in-company blogs, or maybe the departmental blogs, and the corporate site or microsites for departments or pages and so on. That brings us to the end of our presentation here today. These are our contact coordinates, our email, our site URL, our blog, our corporate blog, and our pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus.